Section 13, Changing the Master List. So quick high level, we're going to introduce you to what we need to do when we need to make changes and additions to the master list. There will be follow-up training, so we practice doing this in real life situations because it's one of the more important and technical pieces of using Saru software, and also the possibilities for making errors and creating additional work is significant. But as I said, we're just going to introduce the techniques and we will work through these in a more practical sense in further sections of your training. So the master list currently contains around 13,000 products, but it's obviously always changing and growing as we make updates to existing items, encounter brand new products we've never seen before, and also create new sizes of items in the master list. So there was 3 points I made there. Let's just quickly explain them. So making updates to existing items. So sometimes we might realize a tear weight is off. We might want to update the name of a product to be more correct or precise. Equally, it's possible that the barcode for a product could change and we want to add that information. So that would be an item which is already in the master list, or a vessel which is already in the master list, but we make changes to. That is updating an existing item. Then the second part is obviously adding in new vessels which are not yet in the system. That's creation of completely new items. And then second of all, as you know, in the liquor category, we do collapse different size products together, and what this means is that if it's the very first time we find a particular product and therefore that particular sized vessel, we can just add it like normal. However, if we, for instance, find a 750 milliliter bottle of Jack Daniels and that size is not in the master list but the liter bottle, so the product is already in there but we've now got a different size, there's a special technique we need to follow because we need to set those line items or that new vessel up so it contains the existing product but contains the information that's specific to that different size. And again, we'll go into that in more detail. So when you encounter a new vessel which is not yet present in the master list, you'll need to add a new vessel in there. But before you do so, it's very important that you do a check to make sure that the vessel is not already in the master list. And in doing so, we want you to check various different naming options. So if you're looking, for instance, for Jack Daniels, you might type in Jack Dan as well as the Jack Daniels or JD or stuff like that. But being a little bit diligent in performing your searches to see if an item is already in there is important because it saves work down the road. So if you enter details of vessel which is already in the master list, you're creating additional work down the road because we have to identify and correct this mistake. And remember that everyone at Bar I benefits from complete and accurate master list. So all of the work that you personally do is going to benefit others because then the items which you added will already be in the system, and conversely you'll get the same benefit. But what it also means is that there's a bigger risk that if people are not following correct procedures and are entering errors into the system, the knock-on effects will be significant and it will affect a lot more than yourself. So this is an important topic that we get right. So as we said, 3 different types of changes. Let's go through them in a bit more detail. So we're going to follow these steps whenever we make changes to the master list. So first of all, we encounter a new product. Normally when we scan a barcode, it will look up the item name. If you scan a barcode which isn't in the master list, it will just replicate the barcode number on the count tool, and you'll know that it's not in the system. So the first thing to do is to check if the vessel is already present in the master list, and if it is, you'll make updates to the existing vessel. In that case, if the barcode that you just scanned isn't present yet in the database, you'll need to add that to the vessel which is already in the system. And then number 2, if the vessel is not in the master list and you've thoroughly checked that, you need to follow the correct procedures to add it into the system. And then finally, the advanced, in the case of a new liquor vessel, it's possible the master list always contains the product but not the specific size you found. In this case, we have to follow a different and correct procedure for adding a new size of an existing product. Next, we're going to discuss those in a bit more detail. So check existing master list. If you scan a barcode which is not recognized, you'll need to figure out if it's a new barcode for a vessel which you've already got in the system, meaning that perhaps they've added a different barcode to this product, or the second option is it might be a completely new vessel which we've never seen before. It's important to figure out which of those 2 scenarios we're dealing with. So to do this, we would select the vessel name column of the master list and then do a search for the name of the product. And it's important to try a few different versions of the name, as I mentioned with the Jack Daniel example, to ensure you don't miss it. This is particularly important if you're dealing with wines, old world wines that often have long and confusing names, or perhaps small batch whiskies that can have very long names. But it's important, as said, to be thorough in that check to make sure that we really check that it's not already there. So try entering the first few letters of the vessel name rather than the whole name. It saves you a bit of time, and it's also more likely to be matched. But bear in mind that there is a bewildering number of different products sometimes. If you get into a type of vodka that has different flavors, it can be confusing. Equally, if you get into, for instance, some single malt whiskies, they can have, something like a Macallan will have 4 or 5 different ages, and then they'll have a 12-year standard, and they might have a 12-year that's been oak aged in a barrel in a different way, and so it'll be like 12-year special oak or whatever it might be. But point is, there is a lot of possibility of confusion, and so it's really important that when you check the exact master list, you're diligent and make sure you're doing things correctly. So if you're able to find the correct vessel on the list, update the vessel by pasting the new barcode into the first blank barcode column, or by making an additional change. For instance, if the tare weight was off, you'd update the tare weight to be the correct one. And then after you've made those changes, it's really important that you let the software know that you've made an adjustment to a distinct item. This doesn't happen automatically, and if you fail to complete this step, the change will be locked inside the CTOR you're working on and won't update the actual master list database, which is used when you load a new tool. In other words, when you have that change and you don't communicate to the software that you've made a change to the master list, next time you go to a new bar, you'll have the exact same situation and you'll have to re-enter it all over again, which obviously duplicates the effort. So when you make changes to an existing master list item, the important thing to remember is you have to press a keyboard shortcut Control-J in order to communicate that change. So if you determine that the vessel is not yet present in the master list, then you need to generate a new vessel ID and product ID. Currently, you just press the Control and the G keys at the same time, G for generate, and it will automatically paste into the master list a new vessel ID and a new product ID, and it'll erase those lists, so next time you do that, we won't duplicate. And everyone, just to say it, has their own set of upcoming master list numbers, meaning that we don't, assign 2 different products to the same number, which again would create problems. So once you've created the new vessel IDs and product IDs, the next thing is to copy the information from a similar vessel onto a new line, and then onto that new line you created, and make changes to the names and tare weights, etc. And by similar, we mean a vessel which belongs to the same subcategory. So for instance, if we were entering a 750 milliliter bottle of vodka, the similar item we'd go and copy would be another 750 milliliter bottle of vodka. And then copying the details of that existing vessel and making changes saves you time, because it means that many of the fields will already be filled in, such as the subcategory name vodka and the subcategory code, and so you'll just have to make changes to the fields which are specific to that item, such as the barcode, the tare weight, and the product name. So remember our naming conventions. Be sure to follow the correct naming conventions when entering a product or vessel name. For instance, we preface all draft products with the word keg, so that we can tell the difference between keg bud and bud, which would obviously indicate a bottle. We use special abbreviations for wine, such as CS for Cabernet Sauvignon and PG for Pinot Grigio. And we include the size of the vessel in the name if it's not the default size for the category. What I mean by that is, well, the default size for liquor is 1 liter, so liter bottles of Jack Daniels just have the name Jack Daniels. If it's a 750, that's not the default size, and then the name would become Jack Daniels 750. So if it doesn't have a size after the name of the vessel, you know it's the default in the category, and if it does, then obviously it's that size which is listed. Along those lines, similarly, using the default, in the case, for instance, of the bottled beer category, we presume that everything is bottled. So if we said Bud, that would indicate a bottle of Bud, and the default size is 12 ounces. But if we had Bud 16, that would indicate a 16-ounce bottle, which I've never seen exist, but because they've got the aluminum ones, but not a 16-ounce glass bottle I haven't seen. But then, unique again to the bottle category, we could have 2 changes from the default, which is, in the example we're using here, if we had a 16-ounce can of Bud, we would have to list those 2 things that are not default, which is the can, and also the size at 16 ounces, and we always list the vessel type, which is can, and then the size 16 ounces, as you can see there. If in doubt, have a look at existing items in the master list and refer to those and copy those. And then advanced piece As mentioned previously, we collapse different size liquor vessels containing the same product into the same product. What this means is you have to follow a specific procedure by duplicating the existing vessel onto a new line. So if we're adding a 750 of Jack Daniels, we need to copy the characteristics of the liter vessel, including the existing product ID, and then make the necessary changes to the vessel size, which would be things like the tare weight and the barcodes, which are obviously specific to the size rather than the product. The point being that obviously the glass weight or the tare weight of a bottle of Jack Daniels at 750 is different from the liter bottle, and similarly it will have a different barcode. So when you do this and you're collapsing different size vessels of the same liquor, you will need to make sure that 3 of the fields are the same. Those need to be matched. That's the product ID, the product name, and the product size. It's critical that those things are all the same. And at the time of me recording this video, we're in start of June 2016. This process is about to be changed, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But anyway, there's going to be a significant reprogram which will clean some of this up. For the time being, the procedure is a little bit quirky. Anyway, after we make any changes, it's always a great idea to do sanity checks. So 2 ways. You can press F9 so that everything calculates, and there's 2 places you could do a sanity check to check you've entered the characteristics correctly. First of all, when you're entering the invoice for that product, if you look and see that the pricing is correct, when you enter one bottle it looks it up, it's a good indicator that you've entered things correctly. And then similarly, when you weigh a bottle in the counting worksheet, you should check on the column on the right to make sure that the tenth thing, or the so what column, is correct. What I mean by that is the counting tab will indicate to you to the left of the zone count what I call the so what column that says, hey, this bottle is a 0.7. So if you've set it up with a specific tare weight and you think the bottle's about half full or a 0.5, and then it records as a 0.7, then clearly somewhere along the line in terms of the tare weight or the size you've messed something up. And so performing those checks is important. And just to reiterate, follow-up training. All we're trying to do here in this sort of stage 1 of your training is introduce the basic concepts to you, which is the different changes we make to the master list. As we said, master list additions is where or adjustments is where we adjust or make a change to an item which is already in the master list. We need to make that change and communicate it to the software. New items is when we add a completely new item into the system, so we'll generate a new vessel ID and product ID and then enter the information by coupling a similar item. And then the third most complicated part is when we're creating a different size of an existing product. In that case, we'll follow a specific procedure. But again, we just want you to understand what those 3 different changes to the master list are, and the specifics of how you perform those. We're going to detail that in at a later date. So thanks for watching. That's making changes to the master list, sort of high-level introduction. Thanks for watching.